Hey, how's it going? Thanks for showing interest in Tombstone Taxi. My name is Alex, and this is the technical and systems overview video. If you're looking for the gameplay video, I'll link it. This is not that video. Anyways, in this video, I want to go over a lot of the different individual components and systems and kind of what the game looks like behind the scenes. So while you can watch the gameplay video, it doesn't necessarily show all the things, and it definitely does not touch on some of the future stuff we want to work on. So first things first, I just want to show that this is in the editor that we are building the game in. Very standard kind of system, so not entirely weird or new, but I will be clicking around here, so hopefully you can follow. So first up on the list, we have the list of crew members. So coming into the game itself, we have the ability to choose a crew member from a list of crew members. Each of these crew members has a level, starting at level 1, goes all the way up to level 10 for now. And each crew member brings a different benefit to the team, and as they continue to play, as players continue to use that same crew member over time, they will continue to level up over time. See, as I'm testing it looks like I'm only testing with Bob. But yeah, then the modifier they bring to the team will go up over time. Not all crew members will be playable on launch, like right when you first launch the game. So for example, if Mizzy the Wizzy is not currently playable, like not currently it's locked, like has not been joined the crew yet, it'll show up as this and they can't actually choose that crew member. And maybe there's some indication of like whether or not you should be able to like, you know, complete a quest or something like that to go find Mizzy the Wizzy. And then you come back to it and it's like, hey, he's joined your crew. Now you can add him to your team. The other thing we have is the seat system. So while this is only a preliminary visual to show what the seat is, you can always change your seat in the middle of the ride. This is just intended to be here for players who want to know what seat they're going to be in before they agree to get in the taxi with their teammates. Because like those like 6 or 8 year olds, they're just like, I want to be the driver. I'm not clicking X until I know I'm the driver. And then mom's like, all right, we'll figure this out. Anyways, once all players have confirmed their crew member, everyone kind of runs over to the car and maybe passengers get in and maybe some other stuff gets set up. And for right now, we just kind of have like this UI in the bottom corner to show what some of the controls might be. But as of right now, nothing's really happening. Like the car is still kind of here, right? But what you have noticed is since I've clicked play, or rather since the crew members have chosen, some of the zones have started to spawn in. And more specifically, if I open up here, all of the zones have spawned in. So if I go ahead and pause it and go to all of these, boom, 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 and I click show, you should see that there is, let me turn off this fog effect so you can see a little better. There's a bunch of zones that spawned in. And so kind of like from a bird's eye view, the whole point of the game is to take passengers from this starting city all the way through this like channel of randomly generated zones up until this final city over here on the top, like in the northernmost section or however you want to frame it. And these zones are all randomly generated. So for example, if I rerun the game, I'm going to have to turn the fog effect back off. If I rerun the game, choose another crew member, come back over here. Let's say I pause it. Here. Click, 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 click. And where's the inspector? Show. These are now different zones. I don't know if it was entirely obvious to you, but if you want to go back in the video, you can see that these are different zones. And the thought being that we want to make it so that every like day in this radioactive wasteland is a different set of obstacles. So think of like the bandit gangs that built this fortress got overrun by zombies, and the zombies were pushing in, and so the bandit gangs like tore down their fort and they're like, you know what, forget this, we're gonna move over here. And then they set up camp over here with what remaining supplies they have, you know, that kind of like push-pull tug-of-war system from like a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. And then there's also little areas like this that are like little reward zones. So on the inside of here, there's like little treasure chests that if you bust down these doors, you might get like a reward. Or at the top of this parking garage, there's like a little reward waiting for you if you manage to go through all of the enemies that would be in this parking garage through the multiple layers. And so from a design perspective, each one of these little blocks, like little 100 by 100 blocks, we're considering these like levels. And so you can kind of think of it like if we have a reward level, if we have a difficult level, if we have an easy level, a neutral level where it's just like a bunch of cacti, nothing much happens. We can have all sorts of different types of levels with verticality, levels that feel like a maze. We can get really crazy with it. But at the end of the day, these are set up in a very grid-like fashion. So right now we have 2 rows and 3 columns and then a safe zone. 2 rows, 3 columns, and then a safe zone. 2 rows, 3 columns, and then the final city. Now this is actually configurable based on the difficulty level. So what you're seeing is the demo difficulty level where there's currently 3 sectors where there's 2 rows and 3 columns. And if you'll notice, if I come back over here and I let's say have it say 6 sectors that are 6 columns across, and I literally just hit play, choose, not doing anything else, come back into the scene view, you'll see that, well, it's not super visual, but you can see there's a lot more sectors now. It kind of goes off screen because we don't plan to have for that many. But in theory, we would have all these different sectors. And if I turn these on, I need to pause it. If I turn these on, you would see that there's actually 7 columns across now instead of 3. Ultra configurable. So nothing's hand placed as much as possible. We are really trying to systematize this as much as possible. Let's see what else. And similarly with like the zones, we have the ability, or sorry, with the difficulty levels, we have different abilities to like change what the starting health is, how much radiation damage they take on, how much money each passenger gives you, how many passengers, how many first aid kits, like whether or not you see like helper UI, helper objectives, whether bosses have advanced abilities. Like there's all sorts of different configurable things at the difficulty level, pretty standard for difficulty levels. Our intention is to have 3 on launch. So think of like noob, veteran, and then like Tombstone Plus, where it's like everything is like a ratchet up system. And while we don't have that yet, that's like the general direction we're going with this, as well as like what zones do we want to be hard zones, reward zones, and then like kind of everything in between. So we can have different spawn weights to like emphasize certain zones show up more often than not, depending on the difficulty level or depending on like what sector it's in. Can get really, really configurable to really emphasize, I'll say, the replayability of that aspect of the game. So I've already kind of showed one of the meta progression aspects, which is these crew members. The more you play them, the more you complete missions, and the more you like drop off passengers, the more experience you'll get with these crew members, and you can continue to grow in that way. Another thing that we have, which you can kind of see it in this bottom right UI, is the ability to change your seats. And you can change your seats into one of the other spots in the vehicle. So given that this is a couch co-op game where everyone's taking like shared control of a vehicle, the front spot might be, let's say, a machine gun, and I'm using a keyboard right now, so there's only like 8 directions I could shoot in. But then maybe you can switch into the flamethrower seat or the missile barrage seat or whatever. And these are not necessarily limited to just that particular weapon, because from our perspective, we want to have like a weapon shop so that maybe when you get money from taxiing these passengers safely, you can then head on over to Jerry's Jerry Rig weapon shop and you can upgrade your vehicle for some amount of money and some amount of spare parts, which I'll get into the currencies later on in this video. And so we can have like a whole scrolling list of a bunch of different weapons. There's also attachable utilities. Think of like a rocket booster, radiation shield, or like a freeze gun, or some sort of like hunker down, like bunker button, or like a portable safe zone, like a bunch of different like items that could be created. And these are intended to be like defensive, because if you look at the vehicle as a whole, we have the person in the driver's seat whose ability is the health kit. And then we have all the other gunners in terms of like, what guns do they want? Do you want a flamethrower in the top right? Do you want the machine gun in the bottom right? Do you just want to say, the heck with it, we're putting flamethrowers on all spots, because maybe we have a crew member that does bonus flame damage. Maybe we've upgraded our flamethrower all the way, and maybe we're on a particular difficulty level that spawns enemies that are susceptible to flame or something like that. And then similarly, if you have multiple utility slots, you can choose which utility you want in each slot, and we're thinking maybe up to 3 utilities at a time. So from here, you can literally just drive on forward. Now, to be determined on like the UI of things, but you can kind of see the intention there. Another thing we want to have, which we don't have, there's nothing, no UI is supposed to show up right now, is similar to weapons, the ability to choose your own vehicles. So right now, think of this, while this is only an SUV, maybe think of like a moped, a tank, a tour bus, and all of these having different like properties. So think of maybe the tour bus holds 50 people, the SUV only holds 5, but while the SUV might hold less people, the tour bus has way more health, but also goes slower. And so there's like this push and pull kind of back and forth in terms of like, what vehicles do you want to run with? And then what vehicle attachments do you want to put on your vehicle? And so kind of thinking how all these sorts of systems start to combine together. Next thing on the list is the inventory system. So very typical in a lot of roguelikes, we want an inventory system that as you go through and complete quests, you collect items, and similarly, you should be able to find them out in the world. So kind of like how I showed, there was some reward zone out there, and we were able to pick that up. So for example, if I drive out here and I see it says destroy 6 bandit ammo, and I'll get the tier 3 version of the shards item. That's just one of the many items that we plan to have on launch. As of right now, I think we have like 50 or so items that we have planned to give a variety of different play styles. So meta progression in terms of crew members, meta progression in terms of weapons and vehicles, and then just overall play style to say, hey, historically we've leveled up things that are flame or elemental and electrical and poison and other like things in that realm. So if we're driving through and we pick up an item that's a sword, we pick up an item that's like a flail, we pick up an item that is bonus movement speed, and you're like, I don't want any of these items. I'm looking for the items that give me bonus electrical damage, bonus like chain lightning, bonus fire damage, a trail fire out the back of the car. Like, I want to see all that stuff. And let me actually drop in some of those so you can kind of see what that looks like. Let's see here, here. And similar in such a way, if we have like a propane tank for a vehicle that leaks fire out the back, the shards, which does like explosive damage, and then also a lifesteal item. And it literally is that easy from our perspective to be able to put items in very particular spots in the game, as well as spawn them for the players in a random order. So we can have, if we look over here at our inventory manager, we should see not only all the possible items that can show up in quests, but also all the items they currently have equipped, what item tier they are. So think tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then seeing like what that looks like in terms of like tooltips when you like hover over the items or like you navigate over to them. Similar to the items, the ability to actually like remove them from your inventory if you don't want them. So here's the fire out the back, or you can now see like explosions when things die. It's kind of doing like an AoE set of damage, which is always super fun. And then like the plus in the middle is the intended effect for I'm gonna die here. The intended effect for lifesteal. I guess I didn't steal enough life. But yeah. In general, we're always looking for really interesting and new ways for us to create these systems so that we can build stuff not just one time, but reuse it over and over and like expand it and have people such as level designers, game designers, artists come in and really think of something unique and then type up a small brief and have the actual like gameplay engineer or coder, which is basically myself at the moment, come in and make that thing happen in very small lines of code, add it to this list that you see here on the right, and then boom, it's immediately available as a quest item. Like, it's not super complicated. Let's see, next thing up on the list, enemies, which you kind of saw. I don't really need to go super in depth on how enemies work as a system, but we have I'll say semi-unique system. I don't know, I don't want to call it unique because that's a little bit like annoying to say that. But here, for example, you see this little heart that has spawned right here, as well as these like scorpion-looking dudes kind of crawling around. So you can see them kind of walking around their business. Sorry, I'm like scrolling way too fast. There we go. And so if we look at the actual frost area, you can see on the right-hand side, we have these like spawnable categories. So if I go into like the zombie skeleton category, there's like a 50-50 chance that a zombie spawns or a skeleton spawns, or like a 100% chance that scorpion men spawn, and there's 10 of them on start. And so all of these categories are set up in such a way that the enemies can be configurable, right? I think that's the best way to say it. So that each of these zones not only has a unique feel, but also can have unique things, such as like we're going to have this, we're going to have this particular collectible item spawn, and it's going to be on a particular route, and it starts to feel like you can see the green lines here. It starts to feel like each thing can show up in a very modular way. Hopefully, and this is the part of game design that we're really trying to be cautious of, hopefully that aspect of game design is not lost, like the chaos of it's not lost on us, because it's very easy to create randomness and end up with a bunch of nonsense. So making sure that things are randomly created in a way that makes sense is something we're really trying to focus on. Next up is boss. And so this is not overly crazy, but I would at least like to show it. So if we go into here, one of the things we want to have is a modular, essentially boss system as well. So think of it, for example, if you go through all here and you get to the final city and the passengers just get dropped off. Like that's anticlimactic. There's no final tension there. And so we want it so that when you do finally get to the city, some cinematic kind of plays of like defeat the whatever boss name is, defeat the sandworm, defeat the cyborg or whatever. And then he just like comes charging at you. The camera backs up and starts going through all his attacks. We got the health bar across the middle. Again, a lot of very standard stuff in boss design and level design and overall gameplay pacing. And I'm going to pause it here to kind of show. I know this is a very simple example, but the thought being that if they start here right out of the gate, they have no upgrades, no power-ups, no nothing. And then as they go through, they're going to gain more power-ups, and the enemies are going to become more powerful over time, to the point where by the time you get to right before the boss, you might be very low on health kits. Radiation is ticking very often, which I don't realize I haven't explained that yet. And you get through to the boss and you're panicked. Yeah, you have a bunch of items, but like you just spent the last 15 minutes or so. I know this says 28 seconds, but like maybe you spent the last like 12 or 15 minutes building up this character as a team, finding the best perfect items for your build. And you get to the final boss and you have no more health kits and you're low on health. Like crap. So like having this boss is like the ultimate, like final, like thing to get through. In a way that makes it a really satisfying end. And from my perspective as a player, I hate it when games don't have a satisfying break point. I really like those arcadey style of games that you're not necessarily in an endless match. So for example, like MMOs really run into that problem, or like idle games on a phone really run into that problem. And there's certain genres where like you don't quite know when you should stop. Like it's just kind of arbitrary. There's always another thing to do, which might be fine for those genres. But in this case, especially if you're hanging out with friends, you got a bunch of board games, you got a bunch of other games you could play. At what point do we call it and go do something else? So having a boss kind of capstones that and says, okay, boss is dead. Let's pause it here. Well, we're gonna call it a W and walk away. I know that was probably over-explained, but yeah. The other thing, I'm taking a look at my notes here. Radiation, yeah. So in the world itself, so like in the overall like space, there is, and let me bump this out a little bit. There is this concept of background radiation. So the whole point of the game is that you and your crew are the taxi members, are the taxi service to taxi these passengers across this radioactive wasteland, because they themselves are too susceptible to do it themselves. They will not make it if they try to make it themselves. So you are the taxi crew set up in order to make that happen. So what happens is you drive out here, and immediately in the top left corner, which I know the UI could probably be improved, it's not super obvious, over time the passengers are feeling more radiation. So right now it's like they feel 0.1 per second. Like they're they're feeling a little bit of radiation. It's kind of starting to hit them. And then every couple seconds, they feel the impact of that radiation. So the best example I like to give, and let me actually switch it over to a difficulty level where it's a little more noticeable. The best example I like to give is what happens if you go to Chernobyl or some other like nuclear disaster site. You're not going to notice anything. You're not going to feel anything. You'd be like, all right, the vibe's a little off, but like, that's about it. But over time, you're going to start to not feel so good. Maybe you get headaches. Maybe you have vomiting. And like the longer and longer and longer you're there exposed to all that radiation, the more effects it might have on your body. And so we want to kind of represent that and kind of treat that as like a soft timer. How is that bullet coming through the wall? What the heck? And we're going to treat it as a soft timer so that the passengers are really the health that you're like trying to keep like a track of. So as you're sitting here and driving around, the passengers are feeling the effects of that radiation more and more and more to kind of push the team to like, hey, let's hurry this up. Like we are not doing good. And there's even some areas that are considered high radiation. So if I click on here, where are we? Scroll down, left, right, radiation. Yeah. So if we look over here, this is like a really high radiation zone. There's no enemies, there's no wildlife. I mean, there's grass, but like there's basically nothing out there. Like not even the mutants will go into this high radiation area. So yes, you can drive there, but immediately it's like, we should turn around. And now instead of 1 per second, the passengers are feeling like plus 10 per second. And this is like a constant number that never goes down. I say never, but you could remove it with a health kit, but not remove it. You can like reduce it with a health kit, but this number is never going to go back down to 0. It is just continuously like pressure on the team to go faster. And this radiation mechanic as timer is one of the things that not only helps the game from like a lore perspective and from like a backstory and like explains like why some of the systems are the way they are, but it also helps to give guidance in terms of like what to do as a team and how to prioritize your decisions as a team in terms of like, where do you go? What do you look at? What do you try to pick up? Like, should we complete this quest? Well, we don't have time because our radiation's going up. So like, let's just move it along. And that's where some of the player tension happens, where the driver thinks they have enough time to turn around. The players don't. And it just, or the gunners don't. And so then you have this back and forth decision making and player tension and frustration. So, let's see, other systems. Let me see here. Cinematic. Yeah. So we actually have a cinematic that we want to have at the very beginning of our game, where it launches into, think of like the first time you play the game, it shows some guy named Ron or whatever, and he's one of the gate operators of the city. I don't know if you might have saw him waving earlier. And he's just kind of going over all these different pieces of it and like kind of the backstory of the whole situation. This is about like a minute or so. And having these different scenes showing the enemies themselves or the passengers themselves trying to run across, turning into zombies, and like the radiation really affecting them. And there's like bandit gangs that have decided to set up their own camps, and just having like a bunch of different cinematic shots. And all of this
Wasteland provided
is actually, I'm not sure if this is
that
coming
raid
across.
passers-by and convert other survivors, give it a chance.
But we're having a dialogue, like spoken dialogue in our game, essentially, in a way that might be pretty useful and pretty fun. So on that, while we don't have it now, I know I want to have dialogue in general. So imagine you're playing as Bob, right? And someone else is playing as Chief. And then Chief, out of the PS5 controller's little speaker here, you hear Chief's voice out of Chief's controller say, "Come on, why are we going so slow?" And then you hear Bob in the back, out of his own controller, like,
"No, we are not there yet."
Like, and it would just be so funny to have that type of interaction where the one player crew member is yelling at another crew member player, or let's say Chief gets like a combo kill of like 10 or 12 kills in a row. You just hear him go, "Woo, let's go. That's how you do it." You know, it's like that kind of everyone bringing their own personality to the front, as well as kind of emphasizing some of those player interactions and player tension. Because when we think of other games that are in this genre, like Overcooked or, Overcooked is honestly probably the best example. There's others, I'd say, like It Takes Two, but like there's moments where like you want to like yell at your teammate, like Pico Park as well. Like you want to like get mad at them because it's like, why aren't you doing that thing? It's so easy, but like it's not, because otherwise you would have done it already. But that's all in person. And so having that to kind of like emphasize the fact, we think would be really, really amazing. Let's see. Currency. I touched on vehicles, and I touched on vehicle attachments a little bit. Let me go back over here. So imagine, if you will, we have Jerry's jerry-rigged weapon shop. We have Vinny's vehicles. We have Olivia's outfits, and we have Wanda's wares. So think of it like weapons, vehicles, cosmetics, and then like the ability to buy items at the beginning of a run. And so all of those things have to do with currencies of some sort. So the main currency that the passengers will be give you is money. The reason why I went to this screen is because this, I think, is the only screen right now that we have that actually shows the currency. Obviously would have more. But think of it, it's like you have a certain amount of dollars, you have a certain amount of spare parts as a currency that you collect out in the field. And then there might also be like a cosmetic currency, to be determined on whether we stick with that model. But then there's also, if you're spending the money in order to upgrade, which is, I know it says 0 here, but if you're spending the money to upgrade your vehicle to be higher and higher tiers, you're spending this cash and you're spending this spare parts, but it kind of goes down, or it kind of goes up over time no matter what. If you spend it, you don't spend it. Even if you max out all of your items, utilities, you buy all the vehicles, you buy all the guns, you like buy everything, you're still going to be getting money from passengers. And so we want a way to, like, from an economy design, remove some of those things, which I don't have it yet at the moment. But the idea that like maybe these items that you see here, maybe these are purchasable from a shop. So like a similar inventory thing comes up and says, hey, I got 3 items, do you want to buy them? It's going to cost you XYZ amount of money. And maybe certain items can only be purchased in a shop. Maybe certain items can never be purchased in a shop. Maybe certain items can only be obtained from an enemy out in the field or something like that. And so having these different systems set up allows us to tap into the different ways that people set their build up and consider how they spend their currencies, how they spend their time. So for example, if someone really appreciates like speed running, maybe the first thing they do is buy the moped, and they buy the rocket booster, and they buy only items that are associated with like speed as much as possible. And then they are just doing those types of runs. That's totally fine. That's a totally viable strategy. And there's a lot of different ways that the game can be played with, like the whole like mix and match kind of build your own system, build your own systems, I'll say. Especially if you think of it like there's a group of 2 or 3 people, they're all hanging out, they play as a group of people, and then tomorrow, same system, same console, same like core install, same player, whatever, plays with a different group of people. Maybe they can play as a different set of crew members because everyone has their own personal preferences. Or even if it's the same group of people, maybe they want to play with a different play style today instead of yesterday. So trying to provide as many different play styles that still kind of fit the vibe and the intention of the game. And even beyond this. So if I look at like this as a block, this is to us like a very desert-y, radioactive wasteland. It's very desert focused, and very orange. It's very crusty. There's cacti. Like it's very clearly like it trying to be that style of design. However, maybe from like a campaign perspective, campaign unlockable kind of thing, maybe there's a moment where after taxiing 1,000 passengers or something like that, you unlock the next biome. You get a radio call through some comms tool or whatever that someone else on another part of the planet needs you, and you can go to an Arctic tundra biome or a rainforest biome or maybe like a night urban city biome. And basically all we would need to do, take this terrain, swap it out with the new terrain, take all these zones that we've nicely generated for the desert biome, swap them out for the zones for the Arctic tundra biome, and boom, same game, just different feel. Now the benefit with the biomes though is maybe there's new weapons to unlock, new vehicles to unlock, maybe new crew members that will only join your crew if you recruit them from the Arctic tundra biome. Maybe there's different enemies that show up, different level design with like ice patches or frozen water that you have to avoid. And there's all sorts of different like things that you can do on a biome dependent basis that elongates the playtime and the meta progression and the campaign's succession feeling. And all of that kind of goes into the last thing I want to mention, which is game modes. So if you notice here, there's only a play button. And I mentioned difficulty levels, but I never really showed how that functions in game because we don't have that set up yet. But from our perspective, we want to have multiple game modes. So imagine when you click, imagine under the play button, there's like a little block here that says what the game mode is that's selected and what the difficulty is for that selected game mode. And then when you click play, it navigates through all the other menus. So in this game mode, it is a single team of 4 who is driving across a wasteland to deliver passengers with randomly generated enemies and zones. Maybe there's one where you drive across a wasteland with only elite enemies, or maybe there's almost no zones and it takes you right into a boss. Like it's like a boss challenge mode. Maybe there's a game mode that is a split screen, 4 team versus 4 team, and whichever team can get to the end first wins. Or maybe it can even be, if there's up to 8 people, let's say like on a Switch, there can be 4 teams of 2, right? So someone in the top left, someone in the top right, bottom right, bottom left, bottom right. And there's 8 people huddled around a TV or playing online together, and they're racing as a team to see, how quickly can you get to the end or something. And that's just like a fun little arcade kind of game mode. And I could totally see that being alternative ways to play. So instead of just this main game, you can also choose the arcade mode. The split screen modes. The reason why I mention all that with the biomes is because it's like, okay, part of the settings for that is what map do you want to play on? Like what campaign progression do you want to play? It's like, well, I don't want to play the campaign. I just want to do arcade mode. Well, the arcade mode, you can choose whichever biome you want and flip between them, but you can only flip between the ones you've unlocked, and you can only unlock them through the campaign or something like that. And so from there, I think there's lots of opportunities for things in that route. I'm realizing I'm looking at my notes and I did miss one last thing, which is the questing system. It's relatively straightforward in terms of how most like questing systems work. But I do want to call out like how they apply in context with this game itself. So most quests you can see in the top right corner, there's a main objective and optional objectives. The optional objectives have to do with getting into the safe zone. So specifically these safe zones, if you get in there, you will get a full health kit for free. You'll like automatically be healed to full. Your radiation timer will pause, your run timer will pause, and you will get some other type of potential benefit. Maybe there's another crew member to pick up. Maybe there's another one of those Olivia's, one of those like Wanda's wares, like vendors in order to buy more items. Maybe like there's only 3 in the starting city and 3 more here. And the only way to get into and you're like protected from all these enemies and stuff like that because like the nav mesh agents like can't walk in there. The only way to actually get in there is to complete one of these quests. And I see if you complete both, you'll get rewarded for both. So this one says like disrupt the 10 sand huts or kill 20 zombies or skeletons. And if you do either of those, then you're allowed in. So if I go out here and I'm just gonna use my helper method to pretend I killed a bunch of zombies and skeletons, and I go into here, you should see, hey, congratulations, now you can open the gate. Let's go ahead and open the gate, drive on in. Notice health kit applied, timer paused, still getting hit because there's a damage bug. That's going to be fixed. Don't worry about that. But yeah, everything is paused and good to go. That's so annoying to watch. And then as soon as you go to leave the safe zone, the gates open, timers start up again. So it kind of gives, from a pacing perspective, a way for players to really consider what they can do. Someone's go, I gotta use the restroom or something like that. Get to the safe zone. I want to, go get something to eat, or like Amazon guys here. And it's like, yeah, I know you could pause the game, but also like from like a breathing standpoint, especially if like you're seeing this like tsunami of bullets and you're like, like your brain is a little overwhelmed in some situations. Like you're not quite sure how to handle these situations, and you're a little frustrated and overwhelmed, and you just need a moment to, okay, all right, now let's go. And like just that one breath is so important, because like even right here, it's not a long pause, but it's just enough of a pause for you to go, okay, let's fight the worm. And it's just that little bit of pause that helps with the pacing that we're really trying to be considerate of. Because even when we think of games like Mario Kart, like you play a Grand Prix, it's 4 races. There's just enough of a pause between races that you can put the controller down, you can stretch your arms a little bit and kind of shake it off, and then get ready for the next race. But imagine if you had to do 4 back-to-back races, no pauses in between, that'd be so stressful. And so it's just the pacing of it, super, super important, especially with a increasingly higher tension between players, intentionally designed like this game has. So I've covered crew members and their own respective progressions. Actually, one of the things I didn't really mention with crew members, now that I'm kind of going through this, is the way to unlock them. Maybe you complete a quest. So, go to the top of some mountain and kill this one enemy, and then this one guy will trust you, or this one girl will join your crew, and they will be playable the next time. Or maybe you just have to do an arbitrary quest, and that just becomes an objective that will reward them as a crew member. Okay, so I talked about crews, I talked about quests, I talked about some of the different enemies that we have set up and the way that they're a little modular, and the spawning weights. Bosses, I know we only showed the sandworm, but we have at least 2 or 3 different boss ideas we're working on implementing. Different guns. Right now I only showed 3, but we have the ideas for at least 5 to 10 different weapons, and like different weapon types and modifiers on those. Talked about different zones and how those get spawned, different difficulty levels and all the configurations there, as well as the items, the inventory system, our radiation, the cinematics we want to have, all the different currencies, maybe not all of them, but most of the different currencies that we have, vehicles, new vehicles, vehicle attachments, potentially different biomes, different game modes, and dialogue talking between characters. Like this is, and I'm very excited for this, going to be a fully fleshed out working game with a lot of different systems and moving parts. And a lot of what we're working on is trying to just make sure at the end of the day, the game is playable, the game is fun, and people actually know what they're doing. There's nothing more frustrating than doing a playtesting session and someone goes, why did we just take some damage? It's like, well, the bar in the top left. And they're like, I didn't even know that existed. I'm like, well, use your eyes. But then I remember I'm a developer and they're the player, so they're right. Same thing in the bottom left corner. Not entirely obvious that you can switch seats, and like it's just one tiny little piece of text on screen. So we kind of want to have some UI across the middle of the screen that shows what weapon is equipped and who's in what seat and whatnot. So there's all sorts of different ways to handle the UI of things. But yeah, that's our game. This is kind of like a technical demonstration of a lot of the systems that we have in place and a lot of the behind the scenes of it. I hope you appreciated me going through this. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks.